As we start off season 2 of Batman Beyond, we get to see a few new creatures. Hello friends, welcome back to the show. So glad to see you all once again. Here we are for the second season of Batman Beyond. If you're new here, thank you for stopping by. I hope that you'll hop below and hit the subscribe button. Might as well click the like button while you're down there because I think that you're going to enjoy what we're here to talk about. On this channel, we talk about reviewing each and every episode of a cartoon that we grew up on. And right now, we're working through a series talking about Batman Beyond. We're just getting started with the premiere of Season 2, Splicers, which originally aired on September 18th, 1999.
Because if you're not the first, then you're the worst.
As often is the case when a show starts out, the first season, they're kind of trying to find their footing and trying to fit all the notes in that they're getting from the studio and trying to shape it into something fresh and new and brilliant and really working towards getting picked up for a second season. Nothing's guaranteed. But then once you get into season 2, typically with shows like this, they really now have got a good identity. They've got a strong fan base. They've got great feedback. They know what the show's going to be. And then they're really able to hit the ground running. But is this episode a good indication of where the show is heading? But we'll get into that right after our 60-second Beyond Bomb breakdown of the episode. I'm going to give you a whole synopsis of the episode just to get you caught up in case you haven't seen it in 60 seconds or less. Here we go. At Hamilton High School, they are looking at one of the girls that just got spliced, and she has these alligator reptile eyes, and they talk about this new trend of people splicing genes with creatures that go home and find out that there's a different side of it. People want it, people don't like it. There's a lot of contention there. The DA, Sam, is working on trying to shut this down, so Terry takes it upon himself to do a little investigation. So Dana goes to the lab to pick out what she would want, and then Terry finds his opportunity to turn into Batman, and he investigates, and he gets captured, and they go, oh, we're going to splice you with a bat, just in case you came looking for us. They do that. Then there's this fight that breaks out with all of them, and Terry goes to Commissioner Gordon's house and to try to investigate, and when they get more of their henchmen are sent there, and then he starts turning into a bat, and he runs back to the Batcave, and Barbara calls Batman and goes, hey, I think something's wrong with Terry, and meanwhile they find him in the Batcave, and they're fighting, and they're dueling, and they're trying to... Not off to a great start with season 2. So Bruce Wayne has already taken it upon himself to create an antidote, and they put that in place. And then so Terry goes now fresh as a human again, goes to the lab, and the owner, Culver, whatever his name is, he is transforming into a true chimera thing, and they fight, and he takes him out.
Perfectly creepy is more like it.
So yeah, this is the first episode of the second season, and I was really kind of looking forward to seeing where the new trend is going with the episodes. And this has some neat components to it, and certainly is finding its own footing as a show and as a series, and having its own identity, and certainly separating itself a little bit more from the original Batman series, which, yes, I'm a big fan of the original Batman series, but I want to see this not try to copy off of that. And sometimes I have a hard time comparing the two, but I want it to be its own thing. I want it to be its own identity. So with the start of season 2, I was anxious to see where this show is going to be going. And although it has some great components, but there's also some components that left me wanting a little more, and we'll get into that.
You're lucky I'm late for school, Twip.
But this episode starts with kind of a neat concept that certainly has been revisited over time, which is each generation having their element of rebellion. At one time, it was long hair, and then it was dyeing your hair, and then it was tattoos and piercing, and each generation kind of has their own thing.
Aw, come on, Mom. What about that little relic from your wild teen years?
Which I thought was kind of interesting that this now, taking place in the future, has evolved even further, no pun intended, to being spliced with animals. And as much as I sit here and watch that now and go, boy, who in the world would do that? That seems like a horrible idea. past generations, I'm sure, said the same thing about us when we talk about piercings or tattoos or gauging your ears or dyeing your hair, all these things that now are commonplace, and a lot of people do that. And I think the same thing. I think revisiting, that is that element of sci-fi that I really enjoy, which is taking something that is based around science or based around some sort of fantasy element, but then making it a normal part of society based on where things have gone in the past, looking at the past to surmise where things are going to go in the future. And I think this episode does that really well, that we get to see both sides of the coin. We get to see the people that are going, yeah, of course, this is great. I can't wait to do this.
Splicing is like establishing myself as an individual, you know?
And then other people that are a little apprehensive, not sure about it.
I don't know about this, Terry.
And then the people, the adults, if you will, the authority figures that are going, absolutely not, this is not going the right way, we need to shut this down.
The outlaws splicing completely.
But I particularly enjoyed Bruce Wayne's perspective, which was having seen all the things that he's seen in his lifetime, was going,
something bad will come of this splicing. Something we'll most likely have to clean up.
Now, in the first season, they sort of relied on a certain bag of tricks to get them through the season. Now, getting into the second season, I'm hoping to see some different elements, some different nuances, embracing what they have with this sort of scenario, this sort of setting for the show. And I was a little disappointed that we were back on the subway and thugs causing problems. That was almost directly pulled from the first episode, Rebirth, where we first introduced Terry sticking up for some other people on the subway or train or tram or whatever it is. If you want to see my review for that episode, you can click on the link up here. But here we are in the second season, the first episode of the second season versus the first episode of the first season. And we're already repeating the same sort of setting, the same sort of setup for revealing these characters is on the subway and them causing trouble. And it's really not even justified. They're just angry at the news report that they're trying to shut them down, and they're sticking up for their boss.
How's that for breaking news?
Just taking a few moments to think of a different scenario. And I know you kind of exhaust a lot of those same sort of tropes in some of these episodes and repeating storylines and that. It just felt a little too on the nose to be repeating the same subway sort of setup as they did in the first episode.
How about not, Snake Boy?
As I was watching this episode, I couldn't help but be reminded of Man-Bat. And I started to think, what a missed opportunity to incorporate the science behind Man-Bat into this new splicing technology that they're talking about in this episode. And then as I was researching for this episode, I saw somewhere that Evan Dorkin, one of the writers on the episode, said that there was an iteration of this script at one point where Dr. Cuvier was planned to be the son of Kurt Langstrom, who was the original Man-Bat. And then at some point they got away from that and just made this character his own. And as I was reading about that, I thought, well, that actually kind of, I think I prefer it this way than having it just be another relative. As we had talked about in some of the past episodes, that I want to see our own villains and not just, oh, here, these are the sons of and the descendants of and copycats of these past villains, but we're creating our own villains. But then at the same time, I'm kind of a split mind about this, because at the same time, I'm going, but it seemed too close to the Man-Bat scenario, and especially the point where Terry transforms into a bat-like creature. That felt like it wasn't far enough removed from Man-Bat and Kurt Langstrom to be its own. So I feel like it could have went a totally different direction if they weren't going to connect it in some way.
You're welcome to your opinions for the short time you'll be human enough to have them.
As I had talked about in The Winning Edge, you can click up here to see that, I like the connection that they made with Bane and Venom in that episode, but it was so loose and not directly connected, but just acknowledging the past of Venom and Bane, that it seemed like a good parallel to draw with that. Versus an episode like this that is, as I was watching it, going, oh, it's going to tie into Man-Bat at some point along the lines, and then it just never does.
With a massive overdose of vampire bat serum.
Another missed opportunity in this episode, in my opinion, is the horror elements. When you have people turning into these animal-like creatures, certainly there's a bit of a horror element to that. And I personally am not a huge fan of horror. I know I say that at my own risk. I know a lot of people are huge fans of that genre. Just personally not my favorite or something that I enjoy watching typically. But I think that this episode lends itself to that. And I think back, again, I'm sorry, I keep doing this comparison thing, but I think back to episodes like Moon of the Wolf, and as poorly executed as that episode was, you can click up here to see my review of that episode, it definitely leaned well into that horror element. And I love when shows do that, when they embrace whatever the genre of that episode is and really lean into it rather than having all the episodes feel very similar. And this episode, I feel like they got right up to the edge to do that and then just didn't take that extra step.
No longer Batman. Now you face a true chimera.
So I mentioned Moon of the Wolf, but also Tiger is another episode that comes to mind as I'm watching this episode. And I know I'm trying not to do the comparison thing, but that's an episode where it's not as much of a horror element, more Beauty and the Beast or Phantom of the Opera kind of style to that versus the strictly horror scare scream thrill. But this episode certainly dealt with some of those same elements of humans transforming into animals, but it was missing the heart. I don't think that the story from Tiger, which again, you can see that review up here, I don't think that necessarily would have fit in this episode, but something like that, rather than having all the splice people elements being all bad and clearly the villains of this, maybe dancing on that line of going, well, maybe there is a good quality to this, or maybe there's one or two characters that are redeemable versus them all just being bad and needing to be transformed back.
It was your weakness that ruined my plans.
But in my opinion, the real star of this episode is Ace, the Bat Hound, who finally gets sort of a featured role in this episode.
We can't.
And not only that, but is really the key to this process and is a reliable tool in Batman or Bruce Wayne's tool belt, if you will, that is able to utilize his skills and his resources of being able to smell out the chimera and being able to find them, which they weren't able to do through other means, which I thought was great to feature Ace in this episode. And I love how they treated the story or the interaction between Terry and Ace, going back to their first interaction with each other, that they had a little tension there between them, Ace being very protective of Bruce Wayne and Terry just trying to break into the mansion. That they always sort of had a strained relationship, and now they're forced to work together. And I love that sort of interaction that they had to try to work together to get there.
Look, Wonder Dog, I don't like you, and you don't like me.
And ultimately, Ace coming to the rescue and saving the day, which is a great moment for the episode. But then I look at it and I go, is the payoff of this episode really that Terry and Ace are now friends? Seems like a opportunity could have been there that we see another character that is regretting their decision to splice or is using their spliced abilities for good, and Terry struggling with that moral dilemma of not grouping all of the splicers in one category of them all being evil and going, well, there's some gray areas in there. It could have been a better payoff to the episode, but at the end of the day, we get to see that Terry and Ace are now friends.
Sometimes the small rewards are the best ones.
So when it comes time to rank this episode, maybe I had higher expectations for the first episode of the second season. Maybe there was missed opportunities. Maybe I was being too hard on it. But there was some good qualities to this episode, and it was enjoyable to watch. But I just felt like it fell short compared to some of these other episodes. So for those reasons, it falls at the number 11 spot of my favorite episodes so far. Just below the episode Ascension, which I felt like was a great wrap up to the first season, and just found that the story was just a little bit more engaging than with this one. But I do have this one beating out The Winning Edge. I think that episode just keeps falling further and further down the list because it just doesn't have elements that interest me. Maybe if I was into sports more and that competition and that need to succeed and that competitive aspect of injecting drugs in you to get to the next level, maybe I would appreciate that episode more. But that episode just doesn't do it for me.
I'll never go back to being a nobody. You hear me?
So let me know if the technology was out that you could splice with an animal and it was safe and reliable and all those sort of things. What would you splice yourself with? Let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this episode, please click the like button. If you want to see more episodes like this, just hit subscribe. I have new episodes coming out every week. I am going to be dropping down to 1 episode per week because I've got a lot of other content going on some of my other channels. So you look at the description below and click on other places that you can see me out there so that you don't get bored in the middle of the week. But I will be back with another episode of Batman Beyond next week, talking about Earth Movers. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'm Andy Knode. I'll see you soon.